Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel, and thank you for taking us through these 100 days. We will see you Monday. And Rachel, tomorrow night, you know, you've been doing this 5 nights a week nonstop for the 100 days. Tomorrow night, I think it's possible you'll have some thoughts of the day on the news of the day. And if you want to text those to me before or during this TV show, I will say those words on the air. Any thoughts you might have about tomorrow's news?
I can
welcome.
Promise you. I can promise you with a lock on it and an unbreakable chain around that promise that there is no chance that I will do that, Lawrence.
Yeah, that's
will not
that's
happen.
about what I was. That's about what I was figuring. You know, Rachel, I went by one of my old haunts in town today, the Paramount lot, which, as Hollywood lots go, is one of the greats, one of the classics. To visit a writer's room there, friends of mine working in the writer's room, and when I'm in LA, I like to hang out in those places, which, when you are actually working in them, it can feel very unpleasant, but when you miss it as much as I do, it's just a fun place to hang out. And it got me thinking in that mode today when I came across some of the Trump news. And that made me wonder, today's one of those days made me wonder, what would Donald Trump's character name be if he were a character in The Sopranos? And so I got permission. I got permission from the great David Chase, who created The Sopranos, to offer my guess, what I would pitch in The Sopranos writer's room. In fact, just to be sure, I texted David, I don't know, an hour and a half ago, and I said, on my show tonight, I'm going to take the liberty of suggesting what Trump's character name would be if he were a Sopranos character. You'll have a better idea, I'm sure. And I'm sure David will have a better idea. He immediately texts me back and says, nah, go for it. I can't wait. So David Chase has authorized me to take my wild guess about what Donald Trump's Sopranos character's name would be if he were a character in The Sopranos.
Okay, every single word and premise of that is freaking fantastic. I got to tell you, though, I sort of feel like Donald Trump already is a character in The Sopranos, and obviously he's Livia. He's Livia.
Yeah,
he's the whiny mom.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes. Who eventually gets, I've always thought of him as Livia Soprano with too long a tie on. But, you know, you inventing a new character for him, I will stick around to see that.
You're way ahead of me on this, and I think you're exactly right. I would join, I would quickly join Team Rachel in the writer's room as soon as you made that pitch. I'd be dropping my idea and going, yeah, that's it. Let's go with that.
Once you hear it, he kind of looks like her too. Like from the side,
yeah,
there's like a Olivia thing going on. I know.
It's all there.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. See you Monday.
Thank you.
See you Monday.
Yeah, see you Monday.
Okay.
See you Monday.
But, well, we now have a new possibility for the now years-old guessing game of what Donald Trump's name would be if he were a character on HBO's Emmy-winning gangster series, The Sopranos. If I were in The Sopranos writing room today, my new pitch for the Donald Trump character name would be Donnie Two Dolls. And I'm sure the Emmy-winning creator of The Sopranos, David Chase, would have a better idea. I'm sure he would. But for me today, he's Donnie Two Dolls. And here's why. As we reported on this program last night, companies in the United States who do most of their business during the Christmas season, including companies that sell toys, are facing such a bleak Christmas because of the massive Trump tariffs that some of those companies are already consulting bankruptcy lawyers. Today, that story about the Trump Scrooge effect on Christmas spread to the point where Donald Trump knew he had to respond to it. The New York Times reported factories in China produce nearly 80% of all toys and 90% of Christmas goods sold in America. Alarm in the industry is palpable, with the companies predicting product shortages and higher prices. Some business owners citing how crucial holiday sales are to their bottom lines are consulting bankruptcy lawyers. And now with 238 shopping days until Christmas, Donald Trump today decided that we just have way too many dolls under those Christmas trees in America, and it is time to cut back.
Much of it we don't need. You know, somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have 2 dolls instead of 30 dolls, you know? And maybe the 2 dolls will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
So Donnie Two Dolls thinks this country's kids are wildly oversupplied with dolls. During World War II, when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was leading the world in the war against Nazism, while President Roosevelt was leading this country out of the Great Depression at the same time, there were restrictions on what you could buy in this country. There were government-imposed price controls and government-controlled purchasing limits on things like tires and gasoline. But in the worst of World War II, at the absolute height of our mobilization effort, the President of the United States never said how many dolls could be under a Christmas tree. Only Donnie Two Dolls could think like that. Why didn't he mention that in the campaign? Why didn't Donald Trump say in the campaign, there's not going to be as many toys under the Christmas tree when I'm president, especially dolls? And why didn't he say Christmas was going to be more expensive? Why did he never say that his tariffs were going to mean that on Christmas you were going to have to pay, as he put it, a couple of bucks more for those 2 dolls? And why is he saying that now? He's saying it now because the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the stock market and the Democratic members of Congress and the Senate, like our first guest tonight, Senator Elizabeth Warren, are hammering Donald Trump with the truth about his tariffs every single day. Today, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren posted on social media, quote, Trump on day one, your costs will be lower immediately. Trump on day 100, your kids will now have fewer toys, and also you're going to pay higher prices. For those of you out there who have ever owned a Barbie, I know most of you owned more than one if your parents could afford it. I know many of you owned at least a dozen, but Donnie Two Dolls says those days are over. No more in America. 2 is enough. And there appears to be, from the historical record, some consistency about Donald Trump's ice-cold feelings about dolls.
I remember one of my earlier Christmas gifts was a Barbie, and I was devastated because my brothers had gotten Legos and erector sets. Right. So to me, this, is traumatic.
Pretty easy life, if that's what you call traumatic. There are children starving to death in Africa tonight because of her father. Her father stopped the life-saving food deliveries that the United States was making to save lives in the famine in South Sudan. That's what USAID was doing there, saving lives with food, the most elementary way you can save a baby's life, by feeding a starving baby. And her father stopped that. In that TV appearance, Ivanka Trump told Conan O'Brien that she grabbed her little brother's Legos and built a model of Trump Tower with them that her father was very proud of. And then, in a book she wrote a couple of years later, Ivanka Trump said that her brothers confronted her about that Lego story, claiming that it just wasn't true. And so it seems tension about what's under the Christmas tree and what happens with it can last an awful long time in that family. And it seems Donald Trump might be the only rich guy in America who bought his daughter exactly one Barbie. I'm sure she was in her Barbie phase for more than just one Christmas, so let's just assume that Donnie Two Dolls ended up getting her at least 2 Barbies during that period. What you see in Donald Trump's deranged riffing today about 2 dolls is that all of the chaos landing on us from the Trump tariffs was never anticipated by Donald Trump because he does not understand how tariffs work. I thought Donald Trump was lying every day of the presidential campaign when he said China would pay his tariffs. I thought Donald Trump was at least smart enough to know that tariffs imposed by the United States are paid only in the United States when those goods from foreign countries arrive in the United States. The tariff is paid right on the dock by the companies like Best Buy or General Motors that import those products. The Wall Street Journal wisely, in its editorials, calls tariffs border taxes, because that's exactly what they are. They are sales taxes imposed on Americans at the border, at the port of entry into this country where those goods arrive. The biggest port of entry for products from China is the Port of Los Angeles. Shipping is dropping dramatically in the Port of Los Angeles, and so longshoremen and truck drivers, who are the very first American workers to touch those goods as they arrive in the United States, then move through the United States, are facing the possibility of massive job losses thanks to Donald Trump's tariffs. And they might only be able to afford $2 under the Christmas tree this year, thanks to Donald Trump. There's no way to survive this. That's what Rick Woldenberg said today on MSNBC in an interview with Chris Jansing, where he explained what Donald Trump's tariffs are doing to his company and the 500 people who now have jobs in that country, in that company, but whose jobs are now threatened by Donald Trump.
Our company makes educational products. We sell into schools and we sell into homes, and there's a lot of people who depend on what we do. So obviously frustrating that he basically says what happens to us and the 500 people that work in our company is no concern of his. I can tell you that the stock market is going down, in my opinion, because only one thing has changed, and that's these tariffs. The economy was booming when he came in, and he hit us with tariffs. We are responding to the incentives that he's given us. His first tariff at 10% was a big problem for us, and we immediately began canceling events and cutting our spending. It's now gone up into the stratosphere. It's 2.5 times what he said on the campaign trail would be the highest tariff he would put out. There's no way to survive this. We're in the most competitive market in the world. And I'd like to say one other thing. He said, you know, we had to take our medicine. We're not taking medicine here. We're taking poison. This is going to kill these businesses. I'm one of 300,000 businesses in many industries that are similarly situated and similarly affected. We're not a rounding error. You can talk to any of our employees and ask them.
We're not taking medicine here. We're taking poison. This is going to kill businesses. Voters know now that that is true. This is poison. It's going to kill businesses, kill jobs. And so tonight, Donald Trump has lost the support of the voters who made him president, not the hardcore 25 or 30% who think Donald Trump is some sort of religious figure who they are devoted to. There's probably nothing that Donald Trump could ever do to lose them, no matter what's under their Christmas tree. But weeks ago, Donald Trump lost that 3 or 4% of voters who made him president in the final days of voting and making their decision to vote. And now he is the most unpopular president on the 100th day of his presidency since the invention of polling, and possibly the most concentrated negative opinions and feelings about Donald Trump are held by business leaders, including Republican business leaders. A new poll shows that 84% of business leaders say they are very or somewhat concerned about the impact of the current political and legal climate on their businesses. In that poll, 81% of Republican business leaders said they are very or somewhat concerned about the impact of the current political and legal climate on their businesses. When Donald Trump decided to get into the business of selling his strangely enormous neckties in bright, garish colors, he had those neckties made in China. And the Trump golf carts, where Donald Trump appears to spend as much time as he does sitting in the Oval Office, those golf carts are some of the most international products in the world. CNBC reports while both Club Car and E-Z-GO assemble their golf carts in the United States, they source their components from China, Taiwan, India, Malaysia, Turkey, and Europe, among other countries. No matter how long Donald Trump clings to his tariff madness that is separating him from voters and making congressional Republicans vulnerable in the next election, and no matter how long Donald Trump plays golf, he will never in his lifetime ride in a golf cart made with all American parts. That will not happen in Donald Trump's lifetime. The Wall Street Journal editorial board was very disappointed that Jeff Bezos assured Donald Trump in a panicked phone call made by Donald Trump that Amazon will never reveal to customers how much the Trump tariffs are adding to the prices they will pay and already are paying on Amazon. The Wall Street Journal editorial board said, quote, "The public could have used Amazon's price transparency. Tariffs are taxes, and it's helpful to know how policy choices affect final prices. Some shoppers might say the additional cost is worth it to support Mr. Trump's policy, but there's no denying that they're paying, and everyone is better off knowing how much. Like taxes, tariffs often add a precise dollar figure to a sticker price. Voters who pay little attention to the macroeconomy will notice a direct markup on items they buy." Senator Elizabeth Warren has some questions for Jeff Bezos and what she called his subservience to Donald Trump after Donald Trump made that phone call to Jeff Bezos to complain about just the possibility of Amazon actually revealing on its website what the Trump tariffs are actually doing to prices. Senator Warren wrote to Jeff Bezos saying yesterday's activity appears to be another example of big tech working together with President Trump to seek special favors or support his policies in what can appear to be a quid pro quo. My concerns about the potential for tariff-related corruption to benefit big tech firms who provided millions in donations to the Trump inaugural committee and other insiders as the president rolls out, reverses and modifies his policies, have become more acute with each passing day. And yesterday's report indicated that you have now personally become involved in key decisions about what consumers can learn about the true cost of tariffs. Tonight on the Senate voted 49-49 on a resolution to stop Donald Trump's tariffs that he imposed after declaring a national emergency. Two senators who missed the vote would have voted in favor of the resolution. The Republicans who voted for the resolution include Senator Rand Paul, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. Before the vote in the Senate tonight, Senator Elizabeth Warren said this.
President Trump took a strong American economy and broke it in less than 100 days. Right now, Republican senators are at a crossroads. Will they vote to stop Trump's chaotic tariffs and save our economy, or will they continue bending the knee to Donald Trump? Americans are worried they won't be able to survive a cratering economy. And just today, Americans woke up to the news that Donald Trump single-handedly shrunk our economy in 3 months and raised the cost of their groceries. The warning lights are all flashing red. We've seen this before, but this time our economy is teetering on the edge, not because of a mortgage meltdown or a one-in-a-century virus, but because of one man alone, the President of the United States. If Republicans care about the American people, they will vote yes on our resolution today and turn off the fake emergency that Donald Trump is using to impose his on-again, off-again, red light, green light tariffs, the tariffs that are pushing our economy off a cliff.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. She is the ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee and a member of the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Warren, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to begin on that point you made about one person has caused that. And if you look back throughout the economic history of this country, we've had plenty of downturns, we've had depressions, we've had recessions, never caused by an individual, by one person making decisions that caused a slide like we are seeing now that is, according to many projections, on its way to recession and real job losses.
Yeah, you know, you've got it exactly right. And the contrast here is breathtaking. So for over a year, Donald Trump ran on he would lower costs on day one. How many times he said on day one? Those were his words. He gets elected. In his first interview, he said that was one of the main reasons he won. And now he's been there 100 days. He has taken this strong and growing economy and he has broken it. And he has already driven up prices for consumers. We also saw the data come out today that just the grocery basket has become more expensive in the 100 days that Donald Trump has been president of the United States. And then when you weave in with that, this isn't just like a little blip or one kind of problem we're dealing with. It is the 1-2 punch of the chaos that's been created by these tariffs and the opportunity for corruption, for Donald Trump to sell favors by giving exceptions for some people, who knows, raising tariffs for others. In other words, chaos and corruption together, that's what truly breaks the back of an economy.
Yeah, the corruption point that you raise with Jeff Bezos is so important. And tariffs, it seems to me, especially the way they're being executed now, literally by one person, have introduced a corruption opportunity that is the greatest corruption opportunity in the history of this country. I mean, you're on the Banking Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, and you know that the most expensive lobbyists in the world surround those committees all day, you know, trying to get their provisions into banking legislation, tax legislation, and so forth. It's so much easier now. You go to one place and you talk to one person and you talk to him on the phone maybe when your business is thinking about doing something that might bother him, and by actually describing what tariffs are doing to prices.
Yep.
What do you get back when you do a favor for Donald Trump like that?
You know, maybe this is what Elon Musk means by efficiency, one-stop shopping for corruption. And remember here that this conversation today that took place with Jeff Bezos is in the shadow of a conversation that took place just a couple of weeks ago with Tim Cook, another billionaire who donated $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration. Remember how Donald Trump said, I'm putting these tariffs in place and there will be no exceptions. And how do I know Donald Trump really meant that? Because he put it all in caps in the tweet. No exceptions. You remember that? And then Tim Cook gives Donald Trump a call, and Donald Trump comes right out and says, I talked to Tim Cook, and we're going to have a special deal for his company. Apple will get an exception to all of those China tariffs. So the opportunity here through the tariffs for dealing back and forth in corruption is truly staggering. Understand again, one person is in charge. This is like the king who just waves his magic scepter, and all of a sudden that one over there has a lot more money and is doing great, and all those people over there are doing worse. And it's all a question of who helped the king in whatever way the king wanted to be helped most. And at the end of the day, you and I can sit here and point this out, but understand it is truly American families that will pay the price for this. The recession that the economists are talking about, yeah, it's a lot of numbers and GDP shrunk today, but families live this one day at a time. This is about higher prices for groceries, higher prices for toys for the kids. It's also about the risk that you're going to lose your job. It's about not being able to make it to the end of the month. And American families, millions of them, are already in much more economically precarious shape than they were a year ago at this time. Consumer debt is up. It's at higher levels, $4 trillion higher than it was in 2019. Consumer defaults on credit cards are at the levels we saw in 2008 in the middle of the crash. Same kind of thing for car loan defaults. And families are telling us themselves that they are worried. They are worried about prices going up. They're worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about holding it all together financially. That is what 100 days of Donald Trump has brought to the living rooms of every American family.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, an honor to have you here with us on the 100th day. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And coming up, tonight, we once again have to ask the question, did Donald Trump say that because he is stupid or because he is lying? We will play the video. You can decide. That's next. There are many ways to measure how stupid Donald Trump is and how much neurological decline he might be experiencing, and one is to look at this photograph of the left hand of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who, according to Donald Trump, is being kept in a prison in El Salvador by mistake because Donald Trump wants to keep him here. That is the opposite of what Trump lawyers have told a federal judge in the case. Anyone who isn't stupid looking at that photograph can immediately tell that the perfectly formed MS1 and 3 are photoshopped in the crudest possible way, with no attempt to make them look like they are even attached to that hand or are real tattoos. There are real tattoos on those fingers below those perfectly formed letters. You can see in the photograph. There's nothing gang related in the actual tattoos that are on his fingers. And when Mr. Abrego Garcia was photographed last week in El Salvador with Senator Chris Van Hollen, that MS-13 thing that only Donald Trump believes is real was not there. Not there. Last night, Donald Trump, of course, without being smart enough to realize it, became a new witness in the case when he said repeatedly, "I could," after interviewer Terry Moran said, "You could get him back."
It's about the rule of law. The order from the Supreme Court stands, sir.
Came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has
he's
ordered
not.
you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law. You want me to follow the law? If I were the president that just wanted to do anything, I'd probably keep him right where he is.
Supreme Court says what the law is.
I could. Those words will be presented to the judge in this case. Donald Trump, after that, kept insisting that he is stupid enough to believe that the obviously photoshopped MS-13 tattoos are real tattoos. But because Donald Trump is such a committed liar, this is one of those cases where it's hard to tell. Is Donald Trump just lying, or is this just stupidity?
By law.
And you'll pick out one man, but even the man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute
well,
over that.
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was photoshopped. So let me
That was photoshopped, Terry.
Yeah, that was photoshopped. Joining us now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and former chief of the criminal division in the Eastern District of New York. He's also an MSNBC legal analyst. So, Andrew, I'm very interested in what Donald Trump said in that interview that might find its way into court.
Sure. So first, whether your conundrum of whether this is something that he's stupid or lying is one where either one is not good when you're talking about the president of the United States. And, we may not know the answer, but we do know that we're not saying either one of these is an attribute that you want in the president of the United States. With respect to the statements that are making their way into court, and my understanding is that they may have actually already made their way to Judge Sinis, who has denied a request for the government to delay discovery yet again and is going to move forward, is his statement that he actually can cause the release of Abrego Garcia, a man who is there, by the way, wrongly, according to the court and according to the Department of Justice own lawyers. He is there wrongly in jail as we speak tonight. And the president is saying, I could bring him back, but I'm not, is the kind of thing that goes directly to the issue before the judge, which is contempt of court. This is not the only judge who has this issue. It is happening over and over again in front of judges who are democratically appointed and Republican appointed judges, even judges appointed by Donald Trump. This is a constant pattern that we are seeing on this 100th day of Donald Trump, is this taking on the courts and not obeying them. And this statement by Donald Trump is going to be exhibit A to that issue.
Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
And coming up, no one really counted a president's first 100 days until 1933, when the new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, accomplished more in his first 100 days than any previous president. That record has never been matched since then. President Roosevelt didn't do it by executive order. He did it the old-fashioned democracy way, by pushing legislation through Congress and signing it into law that is still protecting us all tonight. Our next guest, Jonathan Alter, wrote a beautiful book about Franklin Roosevelt's first 100 days, and he will join us next to compare and contrast the 100 days that we have just lived through with those first glorious 100 days of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Before term limits were imposed on the presidency by constitutional amendment, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was our longest-serving president, elected 4 times in a row. He died in the 13th year of his presidency, nearly 12 weeks after his 4th inauguration. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the most innovative practitioner of government in American history, led the country out of the Great Depression of the 1930s and led this country and our allies to victory in World War II as the most successful war president in American history. The most famous thing Franklin Delano Roosevelt ever said, the line that has lived after him, is, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." He did not say that at the beginning of World War II. He said that on the very first day of his presidency in his first inaugural address. And 100 days later, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had accomplished more in the American presidency than any previous president. He changed our relationship to government, and he did not do that through executive order. He did that through legislation that he suggested to Congress, or in some cases wrote for Congress, and by scrupulously following constitutional process in those remarkable first 100 days that have since then become a benchmark for all presidents. Franklin Roosevelt pulled the country through its darkest period since the Civil War. It is impossible to describe in the brief time we have on this program just how much fear there was in America the day before Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president of the United States. Our next guest, Jonathan Alter, has done the best job of describing that fear that I know of in his classic book, The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and the Triumph of Hope. Before President Roosevelt took the oath of office, the American banking system was on the verge of collapse, and everyone knew that. Everyone feared that they could wake up tomorrow and discover any money they had in banking accounts was just gone. People were afraid to deposit money into banks and were hiding it under their mattresses. To save the banking system, one of the things President Roosevelt had to do was to convince people to deposit their savings in banks and to convince people that their savings would be safe in those banks, and your bank accounts are insured tonight by the federal government, thanks entirely to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who decided that the government could and should eliminate that fear, the fear that you could lose all of your money in your bank account, by creating the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And that was just one of the many things President Roosevelt did in those first 100 days in the face of the fear that America was feeling. When President Roosevelt was inaugurated, there was widespread belief that the country needed a dictator to get out of the economic hole that it was in. And even some Republicans were sympathetic to the idea of allowing the Democratic president to have dictatorial powers in that darkest hour. President Roosevelt heard those urgings toward dictatorship and did exactly the opposite, working with Congress and the constitutional process of legislation and winning not just Democratic votes in Congress, but also many votes in the opposing Republican Party on many of his country-saving ideas. In Jonathan Alter's Washington Monthly column comparing Donald Trump's first 100 days to President Roosevelt's first 100 days, Jonathan Alter writes, in his first 100 days, Trump hijacked Roosevelt's famous line and essentially said, the only thing we have to use is fear itself. Joining us now is Jonathan Alter, author of The Defining Moment. He's also an MSNBC political analyst. Jonathan, it's the 100-day point. You have the microphone. I want you to just tell us whatever you think we should know at this point.
Well, I think the big thing is that Trump is Roosevelt in reverse. Roosevelt believed in construction. Trump believes in destruction. He's vandalizing the government. Roosevelt believed in compassion. Trump believes in contempt for other people. But even though both moved very quickly and urged action and then actually carried out a lot of action, the action that Roosevelt undertook is lasting, whereas Trump's action is very likely not lasting. And so all the fear that we're feeling about this assault on the constitutional order, the collateral damage, which is horrible in the short term, the lives that are being destroyed all over the world, the children who are dying in Africa, the veterans who already are not getting their benefits. We could go on and on. Your program has done a great job in assessing all of this damage. But the thing to understand is that executive orders do not have the force of law. And we will see many of them eventually, because the wheels of justice grind slowly, reversed. And some of this damage repaired, some of it will be permanent. And of course, the next president can reverse all of these executive orders if he or she so chooses. Whereas by contrast, Roosevelt, you have not just deposit insurance, you have the first aid to farmers, you have a restructuring of the banking system, Social Security and other achievements were in the couple of years down the road. But most of all, you have Roosevelt putting people back to work, the Civilian Conservation Corps. This was the greatest, fastest mobilization in American history. 250,000 young people put back to work. Now, the descendant of that agency, the Civilian Conservation Corps, is AmeriCorps, which already 1 million people have been through in the last 20 years. This has been now temporarily stymied by Trump, and we'll see whether this and other legacies of the New Deal can be reclaimed.
Jonathan Alter, it's just so important for me to have you join us on these 100 days. And to viewers, after going through these 100 days, you owe yourselves the treat of reading Jonathan's book, The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and the Triumph of Hope. It is a beautiful book, an inspiring book, and it's not a long book. It's 100 days in our history, and it's exactly what people should be reading now. Jonathan, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lawrence.
And coming up, sounds like someone's trying to get rid of someone.
Well, we all want to thank you for your help, too.
Yeah.
You really have sacrificed a lot. Been treated very unfairly.
Well, they do like to burn my cars, which is not great, you know.
The federal workers Donald Trump and Elon Musk have fired or are trying to fire have been talking to Jacob Soboroff, who will join us next.
We're fighting to try and get NIOSH back to protect workers, and hopefully somebody will listen and realize the benefit that NIOSH has. I think it's been written a number of times that it's $2 per worker, and we save $250 billion and disability claims, death, basically healthy workers.
When you talk about efficiency, that sure sounds efficient to me.
Very efficient. We were a bargain. We really were.
Jacob Silverov has been talking to federal workers who've been fired by Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and federal workers who are still on the job.
This is what that control burn looks like from the sky. While it was in part lit by hand, it'll grow to more than 700 acres because of ignition efforts launched from this helicopter.
This machine shoots out ping-pong-sized balls into the forest that combust when they hit the floor.
Do you get the sense operationally the type of data NASA's collecting could change the way they fight fires on the ground? Oh, absolutely, yes.
Joining us now is NBC News political and national correspondent Jacob Silverov. He will be featured in a town hall with fired federal workers tomorrow night at 9 p.m. here on MSNBC. Jacob, what more are we going to learn tomorrow night? And I hope there's more film like that we're going to see.
I always wanted to be an action star, Lawrence, and the Federal Workers of America have given me the opportunity to do that. You're going to hear from federal workers from all walks of life, all across the government, from all parts of the country, that touch each and every one of us in different ways. And I think if there's a theme to the first 100 days of the Trump administration, it is what they would tell you is an indiscriminate firing of these workers, where the workers that are being fired believe that they don't think that the Trump administration knows who they are, where they are, even what they do, from the CDC to Housing and Urban Development to the Forest Service to even potentially folks from NASA who took me on that helicopter over that controlled burn in Georgia. You know, many of these folks are waiting to see if their ticket will be called, and they'll be the next ones to be fired. And like I said, it'll affect us all across the country. It's not just about them and their jobs, but it's about all of us too.
Jacob Silverov, thanks for joining us. We'll be watching tomorrow night. The town hall is tomorrow at 9 p.m. right here on MSNBC. We'll be right back. That is tonight's last word.